Speaking of complaining, Tim, Max Verstappen.
That's a great transition.
Agitated is, I think, the best way to describe him this weekend. Max Verstappen, agitated. Now, there was some talk during the broadcast about him going to bed early, or not going to bed early, and doing his sim racing. He was sim racing the night before until 3 a.m. Dutch time, and then woke up early before the race to sim race again, because I believe it was an enduro that they were a part of.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so
They didn't go to bed till 3 a.m. So
yeah, and it's Red Line Racing is his team.
Yeah,
and they won, which is cool. Max Verstappen's a cheat code, I'm sure, in online gaming. But when you are doing that, you are potentially looking at taking performance out of other areas. Now, what was Red Bull going to say to him last year or the year before? What did they say to him? Can't say anything to him.
Well,
he's winning. He's winning all the time. It's working.
So last year, before the season started, I talked to Max one-to-one, and we talked about, obviously, his deal with EA Sports. But then it was like a couple days before Helmut Marko had said that he had like put a sim rig in his PJ. And so, like, I asked him, like, hey, look, Helmut's saying that you've done this. And he's like, no, he's got it all wrong. He's like, I put a sim rig in my motorhome for when I go to European events, because a lot of the drivers take motorhomes to the European events because they're all the way out in the country. It's hard to get to good hotels, and it's just better that way. And I would do it too if I was them. Right. And so for Max, he's got a full sim setup in his motorhome. And so that's kind of like where it all starts, where people are asking the question of how's this guy able to like do that? Is he flying back to home, or what is he doing? That's how he does it. He's got his full sim setup in his motorhome. So, you know, sometimes as soon as he's done his media obligations and he's done his time with his team debriefs, Adam, he goes back to the motorhome and he starts up the sims.
Yeah. And some people think that's a good thing, right? Because the guy's racing all the time.
Sure.
And I understand that. Like, look,
he loves it, right? Like
he absolutely loves it.
Sleeps and breathes it. I respect that a lot. I mean,
yeah,
no question.
Too. And listen, Fernando does the same thing. He goes on vacation, instead of going on a yacht, he goes in go-karts.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Fernando's always driving. And that's so important for a driver too.
Well, yeah, you got to stay sharp. They said that they do say that Eddie Van Halen, you know, guitar player, used to sleep with his guitar. Sure. Would bring it to parties and just play and not talk to people, because it's a singular obsession. Yeah. So the criticism of Max is not the sim racing. It's the fact that potentially it's at an awkward time right before a pretty big Grand Prix, and in a car that with each passing race is very quickly becoming one of the good cars.
Yep.
Not dominant.
Yes.
And he is going to have to work it now for it to win a race. He's going to have to really squeeze the absolute most out of that car. And are you able to do that on lack of sleep? Now, many people can, but I did find it interesting, Tim, and I don't know if you caught this on the broadcast. The Sky Sports guys just fallen over themselves to say, well, we're not criticizing Max. It's just a fact that he was up and whatever. And I think it's a fair question to ask. And, you know, obviously Red Bull this morning is denying that that's the case, and they're saying that he and Giancarlo have the they've got the that sort of relationship where they're snippy with each other, or Max is snippy and he's very, you know, and then back GP's like, you know, or, you know, it's sort of a weird relationship. But this race, he was complaining about the car not being able to brake, not being able to turn. There were elements of that seemed to be very true, and also bad strategy. What's your takeaway from the Max Verstappen race? Leave out the Lewis Hamilton stuff.
Yeah,
for now.
Okay. Should we start with the sim stuff?
Start with the sim stuff.
Look, it's
Does
not
that bother
something.
you, your team principal?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's not something that I would do as a driver, even at Max's age. I mean, even when I was, you know, racing professionally, I was to bed early because I couldn't, and it's different for everybody, right? Like, I'm not Max Verstappen, right? It's just different. He may be fine with it. But for myself, it was the fact that if I didn't get at least 7-8 hours of just good sleep quality, I had a hard time with not letting negative things get to me.
Yes, and that's human, by the way. Lots of people struggle with that.
Yeah, like I always needed to have good restful sleeps and be recharged, so mentally I was able to control everything that I could control. And that was a big thing for me, was being in control of all the things that I could be in control of, and to understand that there were some things that were outside of my control. Mm-hmm. And that took a long time to learn. I worked with sports psychologists for that. And yeah, for me, that was really important. And so I knew what I had to do to make sure that every time I stepped foot into the car, I was turned on, locked in, and ready to go. If Max can, do that, I mean, for sure. I mean, you should be doing that. But as an athlete, sometimes I just wonder, like, is that affecting your performance? In any way, is it taking away from performance anywhere? So that would be a question I would have. Right. When it comes down to where Verstappen is and where the team is at the moment, I mean, it's not in a good place, is it? And look, I am not. I respect and appreciate what Verstappen does. I don't care that he gets snippy on the radio. I don't care that he has a back and forth with his engineer. It's racing. That stuff happens. It's a very stressful environment for those who've never been in it. It is extremely stressful, and you have a lot to cope and deal with. And if, your engineer is just either barking orders at you or you're having a back and forth on the straightaways, then that's what happens, because you can't be clean cut, politically correct, PR savvy when you're in that moment, because honestly, it is a moment that you are at your peak for adrenaline, peak for stress, peak for your physical exertion, right? Everything is at its maximum. So I don't have a problem with the radio stuff, okay? Because that was an issue too for some people. I think my main thing is the team and the updates and the direction that they're going in. Adam, if we go all the way back to Bahrain, when you and I were talking about the infighting at the team and all the stuff surrounding everything that was going on behind the scenes. And then we get to Austria. And again, like, we have stuff with behind the scenes with Christian Horner and Max Verstappen in Austria. And then we get to Adrian Newey, like, leaving the team, right? Mm-hmm. And then we get to the point where all of the big updates that they've brought to this car, like, and I'm talking like big updates, it doesn't really seem like they've worked or haven't worked to the effect that they want them to. And that's tackling bumpy circuits, tackling curb riding. And for this weekend, again, pretty big update to that car. Checo didn't get it.
Yep.
He got a little bit of it, but he didn't get the full deal. Max got the full thing, but it didn't seem like it worked. You could just hear him over the radio how agitated he was at the car in some sessions, how it wouldn't do some of the things that he wanted it to do. And that just points to the fact that, like, whatever they're doing with the car to try and advance it is not working. And that's putting everybody under pressure. That's putting the team under pressure and stress. That's putting the engineers under pressure and stress, and that's putting the drivers under pressure and stress, because the driver can't go and do what they want to do. The engineers are probably frustrated that the car's not doing what they want it to do, and the people who are building the components are frustrated that the components aren't even working. So there are some aspects of it that kind of all take everything into a bigger picture, right? And it affects everything as it goes all the way down. Max is trying to win a driver's title. The team is trying to win a constructor's championship. They have a driver who's struggling, and they have a driver who's in contention for the driver's championship. So for Max, I mean, it's understandable to be frustrated. Like, I get it. Like, I get that. And I think when you take a look at what McLaren has done, Adam, they brought one big update to Miami, which was back in May, and they've only tweaked it since.
They brought no upgrades this weekend at all. It's the same car, and they won by 16 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, that's That's big.
If you're Max, like, yeah, like now you're getting pissed off.
Yeah, and the Red Bull strategy was flawed. I think part of the issue for Max too, and I understand what you're saying, Tim. I completely get it. The sim racing is less of a thing for me. Obviously, as an athlete, you should be getting the most out of your body at all times. But I also understand as a human being that sometimes you need a bloody break from it, and it means losing a little sleep. And
Sure.
So fine, but you can't lose races and do that. So you got to win. You got to win.
Yes.
And he was winning when he was doing that. So, okay, fine. The second driver struggling is an issue. It really is. And it's not because, we have it out for Sergio. It's not because he didn't finish in the points. Guys, the goal for Sergio Perez is not to finish in the points. It's to finish in the top 3 to 5. That's where he should be. Yeah. Max has nobody to assist him. So it's nice that Sergio was 8th, I think. It doesn't matter. It's if he is not up there helping Max is on his own. Therefore, Max then has to manage the entire Red Bull strategy on his own. He has to handle everything. He's got 2 Ferraris breathing down his neck. He's got his old rival Lewis Hamilton breathing down his neck. They were back and forth all race. We'll get to that. And then he's got 2 McLarens that are objectively faster and probably better cars at this point. I think when Christian said we can't continue to walk one-legged after the Q1 incident with Sergio, he's right. And so when we pivot to that here, and I want to do that right now, Sergio crashing out in qualifying, it looked like driver error. I just wanted to check on that because I'm just a guy. Mm-hmm. Did that look like driver error to you too?
Yeah, it was for sure. I mean, there's rain starting to come down at that particular moment in quali, and there's like a where he had lost it. There's like a white line, like a painted white line. Those things are always slippery when it rains, very, very slippery. And then there's also the curbing, the exit curbing, which again can get slippery, and depending on how much rain has come down. And then when you kind of get off of that sort of into the fringe, again, that's quite slick as well. And that's basically, for Sergio, just you're going like, if you know that there needs to be margin when it's drizzling at that particular corner, this isn't a track that Sergio's never been to. Like, he's done hundreds of laps on this track, man.
Yep.
Hundreds. He's been on this track in so many different types and conditions. You should know that part of the track is going to be a bit of an issue.
Yes.
Right. It will be. And obviously Sergio's pushing, right? It is qualifying, and like, I get it. I appreciate that. But yeah, there has to be points where you need to leave that little bit of margin. I mean, the free practices weren't looking too bad. Like, he actually looked reasonably comfortable within the car. It's the fact that when you have this type of a crash, it's like, what does that do for his confidence with the car itself?
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, it seems like I think the best thing for Sergio Perez right now is that Lando and Oscar are the stories because of what happened. But if they were not, and it was just a clean McLaren win and there was no drama, what do you think we'd be talking about today? We'd be talking about that.
We would definitely be talking about, Sergio for sure. Dave Fast asks, with Max no longer dominating and Checo still performing poorly, what do you think Red Bull does with their second driver and his new 2-year contract? I think it's a good time to bring that up, Adam, because it's a good question. Look, I mean, once he had that crash, I immediately was like, I don't think he sees this thing through. I think the team quite possibly could part ways with him before we get out of the summer break. Like, that's how dire this situation is. You have to remember, Adam, they're trying to win a Constructors' Championship.
They are.
And McLaren just took a huge chunk out of their lead, and so too did Ferrari. And everyone's going to look at the points gap and be like, it's quite a bit. No, it's not quite a bit. It's not that much at all. Like,
no,
the gap
I'll give you the points right now. 389 Red Bull, 338 McLaren, 322 Ferrari.
Yeah,
pretty close.
So you got three teams now in contention for a Constructors' Championship.
That's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
it's enormous. And I think that's the part of this that is a story. Is what driver in that position makes sense? You've got Liam Lawson, highly touted young driver, huge ceiling. You think on a guy like that? On a guy like that. But boy, it's a lot to put him in a car next to Max Verstappen. And then you got Yuki Tsunoda, who ran a one-stop race and finished ninth. What a great race for Yuki Tsunoda. He's getting zero credit for it.
Yep.
And then you have Daniel Ricciardo, who had a really good qualifying. Both Yuki and Daniel got into Q3, which is amazing.
Yep.
But they, Racing Bulls came out this morning and said, or I guess late yesterday, that they screwed up Daniel's strategy. They pulled him in too early. They were trying to do something bold, and they ended up just screwing him up. He still managed to finish 12th, which is, the only thing that separated him and Yuki were the two Aston Martins, right? So right where Racing Bulls should be. Daniel seems to make a lot of sense from a veteran point of view. From a performance point of view, Yuki makes a lot of sense. Liam Lawson, just because you have no idea what you have, could be fun. What do you think's most likely?
If I'm the team principal at Red Bull Racing, Adam, I would want to give Yuki a shot. He's been really good, and he deserves it. I think, I wouldn't want to put Liam Lawson in that position, only because he's a rookie coming in, and he's the type of driver who has a ton of confidence in himself. But you're going up against Max Verstappen, and that could be a difficult challenge. He's been known to break a few drivers in his time, right? So you have to be smart with your decision, but at the same time, if you want to roll the dice, I think Yuki's probably would be a good fit. Would play the team game for sure. Could he keep up with Max? That would be the question. Mm-hmm. And could he get the grips with that car? That would be the other question. And then you look at it from an experience standpoint, and that would have to be Daniel Ricciardo. He's been performing really well lately, right? Like, he hasn't been up and down. He's been pretty consistent with the performances for the most part. He probably would have beaten Yuki this weekend if the team hadn't have put him on the strategy that they thought was best at that time. Bringing him on lap 7 probably wasn't the right call. I mean, I know they're kind of following a few other teams that are coming in, like Fernando came in, and even Fernando was just like, what are we doing? Why are you bringing me in? You're going to stick me in a DRS train, and that's where we're going to be for the rest of the race. We're not doing anything that's different. And essentially that's the same thing that happens with Ricciardo, is the fact that you're bringing him in on lap 7, and again, you get stuck in a DRS train, and that's it. Like, that's where you're going to be for the rest of the race. And then you have, Lance, who had a, great first stint, and that's what allowed him to score a point, right? Was that first stint that he went out and was able to manage a soft tire way longer than a lot of other drivers could. And so for Daniel, he's sort of like, hey, you got Lance coming a second a lap faster than you, and the team is asking you to hold off Lance, and it's like, there's no way, right? It's not gonna happen. Like, there's no tires left because of the strategy that you put him on. So outside the race, I mean, when we're looking at it, if I'm Red Bull Racing, I also would take a look at experience as well, because I think it's going to go a long way in trying to secure a Constructors Championship, right? Like, Daniel's has been in some battles. He's gone up against Max and survived, done really well actually. Adam, it's a hard one to call. I feel bad for Checo for sure, but yeah, man, they're going to have to do something if they want to win this thing.